Hello and welcome back. We are going to be doing the retopology of this thing now, which, as I kind of said in the previous video, is not going to include all of this crazy stupid stuff because this is aiming for in-engine, so that's a little too high poly for my tastes. And so what we're actually going to do is basically just stick something behind this, which would just be a solid color, and we just use some sort of emissive map in engine. So let's just make this something like a back inward, whatever the hell that means. And this can just be anything, anything that fits at least. So we'll start with a sphere. It's kind of big, although it doesn't really matter. I don't know, something like that. And we'll just... Nope, I want to scale it in a bit. And I guess scale it down. We do kind of want it to come to the edge of the stuff, but not... not too much. So maybe we start with that, and I'm just going to use the global space because this... I know this is a retopology video and I'm starting off with sculpting, but this is important, you know, it helps to kind of plan ahead. So anyway, with the move tool now, I'm just gonna get a big brush size, just kind of okay, that'll do. For the rest of it, we can actually just cut it off because we don't need it. Go back to default. It can be just a black for now, so let's just give this one current object shader settings. We'll just make it black. That's fine. This will help us quite a bit. We could have pushed it out a bit more. In fact, we probably should, because this is too much of a gap to clear. You know what? I'm gonna go for it. I think it might be fine. So on with the retopo, and we'll get rid of this stem piece. I mean, we'll just hide it. We're not gonna get rid of it. And we'll call this pumpkin, if I can spell it. And we already have radial symmetry enabled, 12 points. 3D coat, it can get a little bit fiddly with radial symmetry in the retopo room. And there's also another kind of issue that we have to watch out for. And I'm just going to do this as a demonstration. So at the moment, you know, putting down these points, everything's going nice. But if I were to let's just say, and this might not break it, but if I were to add in a loop here, it's broken the symmetry somehow, which is a bit strange. It doesn't look like anything's gone a bit wrong, but if you see sort of over in these areas, this vert is actually it's snapped to the underside of the surface instead of the top side of the surface. So it's not quite going according to plan. And ordinarily you can kind of fix this kind of stuff by just hitting the make a symmetrical copy of the layer button right here. But all hell seems to break loose when I hit this with radial symmetry enabled. It will even go crazy if everything's completely fine, but if I just do this, now everything's broken. Things are not even aligned in the right place. You've got it's just a mess. I don't know why it behaves like this. I mean, in theory, all it would do is just take one point, like one master point, and then instance that around. But yeah, I don't know what is happening under the hood here. All I know is that there are some issues, but it is the best way to do this. So we're going to essentially try to circumnavigate the issues, and I'm going to start by using the strokes tool. And so essentially what I'm going to do, or rather the theory of what I want to do, is to lay down, in fact we won't start with this one, we'll start with one of the blank pieces. We want to lay down some existing topology that will cover the well, it will cover one of these segments, and we want to get as much done correctly as possible on the first try, so that essentially it's already mostly complete by the time we actually hit the return key. And what I mean by that is I'm just, rather than doing the points and faces mode and sort of laying down each polygon and then adding in like the splits and the cuts, with the radial symmetry that is likely to cause issues. So what we're going to do is just do the whole thing, like the whole segment as one, and then just basically pray to the gods that 3D code behaves itself. So yeah, it's an unfortunate quirk, potentially I would say a bug, and it does happen from time to time. These things kind of get fixed, but then there'll be some update where it will just break again, or it could be something to do with the way that maybe this is the correct behavior, but you're just not supposed to use it here. But I would still regard that as a bug. It's you know, it's sort of not obvious to the user. Is it possible to move points? Oh, I guess we can. So yeah, I'm just laying down some strokes here, which will eventually become my topology. And we do have this curvy bit up here, so we do want to make sure that we have enough geometry for that. I don't want this to be super dense, but I do definitely want to keep these silhouettes and the shape of the bumps, because that's kind of what sells the whole thing. So, you know, if it costs me a couple of polys to keep that, rather than having everything kind of just spherical, then that is definitely a sacrifice I'm willing to make. We might get some oddities here with the seam, but we'll see. It should be fine. So yeah, with the strokes, you don't have to draw the entire stroke as one. You can just start drawing another one from another point, and you'll just be able to snap it up. So just do that, and then that will turn white, and boom. So that's pretty handy, especially for laying down your sort of base geometry. So yeah, we'll do something like that, and in theory, when I hit the enter button, most of this will be done. Yeah, okay, so it's pretty good so far. Still have the perfect symmetry, and to an extent we can move some things without it causing too many issues, which is nice. So now I'm just going to go ahead and finish this, and it should work. And the nice thing about this is because these are the points that we're laying down, and obviously it's mirroring across this, it is actually going to create the geometry exactly where I want it, because I'm not trying to go into this sort of mouth area at all. I'm trying to get it on the outside of it, so this is pretty handy for that. Yeah, and if I'm moving through these things a little too quickly, I have done an overview of 3D Coat where I kind of explain my sort of favorite tools and how to use them. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing that you kind of need to be aware of is with the points and faces tool, you just have to, I guess it would be the right click, I think, to actually create a polygon, and then it's just a normal click to lay down a point, and it will just do that. So just right click, single click, right click, right click. Yeah, and then it has some other sort of modifiers, I suppose. So holding the control tool, you can set it to do something else. Holding the control and shift tool, you can set it to do something else. So control at the moment is set to split, which is often very handy, so you can just split things, but I'm not going to, because I think with radial symmetry it's just going to break. We are going to get a bit of a problem in regards to sort of all of these points. Like this is enough geometry to cover like the base of this shape, but obviously where everything is starting to come together, you're going to be left with like a lot of polygons needing to meet each other. And we can kind of do something about that by grabbing, let's say, one of these points. So this is one of the center points, like it runs down the center of one of these segments, and then potentially something else here, and you could just fill these in like that. Oh, that's another sort of point actually. By default, the points and faces tool will try to make quads. If it can only make a triangle, then it will only make a triangle, but if, for example here, if it wants to make a quad, if you hold down the shift key, you can actually force it to make a triangle, so something else to keep in mind. But fortunately here, triangle is the only option, so that's what it gives you, but yeah, something to keep in mind. Yeah, so now that's kind of okay. I will actually just try and cap this. Something tells me it's not going to work with radial symmetry, but so it says that a face has been deleted, but I think we're okay. Everything seems kind of okay. This is a bit of a mess down here. We're gonna try to at least do something a lot cleaner for the top, but for the most part, this is an object that will sit on something, so you don't need to worry too much about super clean geometry down here. Although this is fine. It's passable for sure. But up top, probably going to want to treat it a little bit differently. So let's again sort of move this. Maybe we can actually bring these a little bit inward. I guess from my sculpting, I've done things at a slight kind of angle. Well, that's fine. So yeah, from here, let's split these actually like this. So we still have a bit of geometry there. And then from here, we could do the same thing actually and turn these into some triangles. And then rather than meeting everything to a point, what we'll actually do is we'll disable the radial symmetry, and so now this is no longer a symmetrical model, and we'll just come in and start adding these quads. So that should be fine. Bearing in mind our stem is going to sit on top of this, so yeah, it's kind of okay. Although we are at 1750 triangles, that's a bit much for a pumpkin asset, so let's start optimizing a bit. So we'll use the collapse tool and turn radial symmetry back on. Yeah, so let's see what happens if we actually start chopping some of this down just a little bit. So these are the, yeah, so that should be okay to come there, although we'll need to halve our symmetry, something like that. I don't like the color that it's giving me, but I don't know how to change the color of the polygons that 3D Coat automatically gives you. Like it was some other color, I can't actually remember what it was, maybe green. But obviously we performed some sort of operation, and I guess it just remade the mesh. So now it looks kind of bad. So let's hide the sculpt underneath, and let's disable symmetry. Come back to collapse. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess here. And I'm wondering what we can get away with, basically. I don't really want to lose any more detail than we already have. I mean, these areas here, they kind of seem ripe for some optimizations, but let's just do one layer, I mean, and if we like it, then we'll keep it, and if we don't, then we won't. So do that and do that, and then put this back to something like that, maybe. Yeah, so that's okay. So now these are kind of, we've made them redundant, so we can do this down to 1500 already, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, that's about as low as I'm willing to go, really. I will just, I'm not sure what mess I've created here, but I will just I think I've joined those on the wrong end, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just put this one here. So that one goes down there. Ah, yeah, and then this one goes here. And delete edges, just to make it a little bit tidier, basically. Okay, so that's fine. We'll just now quickly just move on to the stem. Stem? No, stem. For some reason, I don't know why, I seem to be cursed when it comes to typing in 3D Coat. You know, I can type just fine, I'm a normal person. But every time I just want to rename a layer or anything inside 3D Coat, I just, for some reason, lose all ability to spell anything. But anyway, let's just do this, and this one's going to be pretty straightforward, so we'll just use the strokes. We've just gone into an orthographic mode, but it seems that this is already kind of at a weird angle. Actually, that's gonna cause an issue. So I want to do this at the highest point, and something like this. So after you do something like this, you just have to specify the number of segments that you want to wrap around. And this is one of those weird ones where I think like 12 is too many, but 8 might be too less. But either way, let's try 8 first. No, that's completely fine. That is fine. Yeah. This fill, this is a new one. I think it tries to basically quad. So it's the same as cap, but cap will just, you know, it will triangulate, which is fine. Yeah, cap's probably the best for this scenario. Not sure why I did that. Essentially, if the reason we're not using the quads here is because now you can see the triangulation of this is kind of being decided by 3D Coat, and it only got one of them right, this one. All the others are actually wrong. So what we want to do is actually, I'm using the Control and Shift mode of the Points and Faces tool, by the way, which is the add and split. So what we would actually have to do is come here anyway and do this. So yeah, you might as well actually just use the cap tool. But yeah, I don't mind this stem kind of coming off like this. I know it doesn't follow our sculpt in this sort of bulbous area, but it's fine. It's just a little stem. No one's gonna know. Yeah, so now let's see this. We might need to let's come out of orthographic. Okay, no, so it sits in just fine. Okay, so that's basically just the geometry done. I'm not super impressed with this area, but I think it's fine. So now let's just UV it. And the way that we'll do that is still in the Retopo room, but we'll just select mark seams. And when you enable a UV tool in this room, it basically adds in all of this other stuff here, which is basically it comes straight from the UV room itself, which I never use. So anyway, this is fine. So let's just hide this. And first things first, let's just separate it. And I'm either going to do something like that, or I'm going to do... yeah, I might actually just do this instead. And you might be thinking about sort of overlapping UVs and whatnot, which is, you know, it's not a bad idea when you think about this pumpkin. Like, whoa, is that right? Is that? Hang on, let me just check. Okay, no, the lid covers that. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, because obviously most of this pumpkin is kind of actually, it's kind of the same. If anything, you just, you know, you UV one of these segments and just copy it onto the others, so long as this area was unique, which is not a terrible idea. I might actually make it so from this point here down to say here should be unique, and the rest of it, no, you know what, sorry, that won't work. That won't work at all because of our lid. If we were to do that, we would end up with some pretty anomalous, strange stuff. I mean, we could still do it if we wanted to be really sort of frugal with our UVs, basically like at this point or something. So all of this area here, well, not all of it. Sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. So if I were to say this, okay, so back onto what I was saying. Because we have this lid area here, if we wanted to do like overlapping UVs, we'd have to do something like this, where we basically have a cut across here, and all of these ones, so the yellow one, the orange one, the purple one, and this other one, they would be sharing the same UV space, but then the top bits would be unique. And that is one way to do it, although you're gonna run into nightmares when it comes to trying to match up texture detail from, let's say, like this area. It's, you know, somehow a little bit brighter than this area or something like that. So if you try to fix the seam here, it will actually break it over here. So yeah, not worth it in the slightest. And I hope that kind of makes sense. But basically what I'm saying is that we're going to do a unique unwrap for this, just to sort of save ourselves any kind of trouble that we would get from trying to mirror or overlap too much stuff. So yeah, we already have the sort of the top piece and the bottom piece done, so now it's basically just a case of trying to peel it. And for the most part, you know, when it comes to choosing where to put your seams, you probably don't want to put it like right down the middle here, because this is the area that people will be looking at the most, so might as well just throw it down the back somewhere. So maybe one of those. Again, it's also not the best area to kind of put that, so just chop it like that. And already, you know, it's kind of unwrapping itself out, but we do need to give it a little bit more help. And I changed my mind about what I was doing here. I am going to make the breaks a little bit further out. It does mean that we're probably, like, if we do end up with a seam here, the stem unfortunately won't be able to hide it, but at the same time it gives us a lot more room to kind of have these entire chunks kind of out and about. Like, I don't really want to start adding in seams in too many places, because obviously the more seams, the more issues, but you kind of need to decide what it is, you know, like an acceptable level of squish or stretch. And for me, I don't think we're quite there yet. Also, I've done this oops, yeah, when I was here I thought the face was over here, but that's not correct. So let's just put a seam down there. So yeah, it's looking a lot less sort of stretched than it was before. We are going to do little bits like here just to kind of help it along, but yeah, I don't want to be putting seams sort of on each segment, because that is kind of just asking for trouble. Unless, of course, you were doing it for the sake of saving texture space, in which case that's a sacrifice that is completely acceptable to make. But for us, we're doing a unique unwrap, so it is what it is. This, that, so the face area is all good. In the back, I guess we're just gonna, I'll do this as thirds. So 1, 2, 3. And again, you know, if you were thinking that you could just copy sort of these UVs onto these UVs, the thing that makes that impossible is our lid, because our lid isn't, you know, it's not symmetrical. And if we're trying to bake the data from one to the other, we're going to end up with seams here where the lid will come across like here, but it won't match up on this side or the other side. You know, it will only match up on one of them. So yeah, something to keep in mind for sure. So let's just go ahead and try to loosen up this unwrap just a little bit by adding in some cuts here, and definitely down on the bottom. If I think it's a little bit too squished, what I might actually do is just come back and I'll add in some more seams, but for now we're just going to continue. So let's just do our stem, and this one's going to be very simple. We'll just do that, we'll do that, and then we'll just do something like that. The reason that I kind of like to do this is if I were to actually have this entire thing as its own essentially its own UV island, and when it comes to doing like an unwrap, so I'll just do one now. Obviously this isn't the most complicated unwrap in the world, but it's just, it makes things a bit difficult. Like, you might know that this shell and this shell kind of belong to each other, but you know, at some other point, if some other artist is working on it or something, then they might be a bit confused. Especially if they're just opening it in something like Photoshop and they're not seeing like the 3D file that you're using to paint. So yeah, I do prefer to kind of do something like this in those scenarios, so that now it's basically just one, and it's not like we lose any kind of unwrap there. It's completely fine. Okay, so yeah, we're doing an unwrap, but this is not the best packing. So yeah, let's scale everything up by a little bit. Let's see if we can manually do this better than the computer. Yeah, should be able to. Try not to go too close to the edges. It can create some issues with mapping. Yeah, no, this is probably going to fit just fine. So yeah, I don't quite understand packing algorithms. I mean, I guess it kind of treats each UV as if it was, you know, like it would put a bracket on it, put a bracket around it, and it would say, you know, something can't be within a certain radius of its entire bracket, which is a shame, because if everything was kind of based on the actual outside of something, then yeah, then you'd get an unwrap similar to this instead of what it was doing, where it's wasting like half of the UV space. So yeah. Anyway, it's time for the moment of truth. I was a bit worried about this area here, and I think this is quite a big gap to clear. And so yeah, now we're going to find out if I was right or if I was worrying about nothing. So let's do a bake with normal map per pixel. And I always start with the inner shell. And I don't think we can see anything, so it's fine. So the inside shell basically always has to remain inside, and the outside shell always has to remain outside. And the key to this is you get like a cleaner bake if these are as close as possible. Like if I were to sort of do something like even like this might completely mess everything up, because you see I'm pointing at my screen again, I need to stop doing that. See sort of this area here, as we increase this value, it kind of inverts on itself, which can get super weird. But also the other thing to bear in mind is if this is your inside cage and then you come here to your outside cage and it's something like there, what it's doing is it's casting like a ray cast from sort of this point to the inside point, and it will sort of bake the texture that it finds in between, which is why you can end up with a loss of detail. So where possible, make sure that you kind of just have these things as close as possible. So I mean that's probably going to be fine for us. You notice if we keep doing it just a little bit more, oops, wrong one. Toggle ghosting, we are getting it poked through a bit, which will obviously cause lots of issues, so something like that. Yeah, so the outer shell, we'll just try to bring it down as much as possible. There are of course tools to increase areas on their own, so you know, rather than sort of trying to fix this stem by increasing like the global value, there's really no point. You know, you might as well get like the bulk of what you want done and then come in afterwards and fix it up. So something like this, and then I don't know, so again I am going to push it just a little bit. So I want basically the pumpkin to be fine, and then we can come in afterwards and just deal with the stem. Yeah, it should be okay. And kind of annoying. There is the tool, obviously, when you use this bake system, you can, you know, scale and expand or contract things, but it seems to also like use some other tool like the mark seam. Like if I sort of right click somewhere to increase my brush size, you'll notice it is actually slightly changing my the position of my vert. And similarly, if I were to tap and try and expand an area, it's going to create a seam. So yeah, that's again, it's sort of another bug. There are plenty, but yeah, it's just something to keep in mind. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'll hit OK on that, and I'll hit cancel, and I'm going to just basically choose a tool that isn't going to just fuck everything up. So let's try that again, bake with normal map. And the reason I hit sort of OK before is so now it's at least sort of starting with the same settings. In fact, let's increase that up a little bit. Yeah, so now when I tap, it's not trying to make more seams, which is handy. Yeah, that should be fine. So we'll hit OK on that. I'm not going to bake local occlusion, just because it's kind of rubbish. So let's just hit OK. And 2K is kind of overkill, but for the sake of a bake, we'll do it. So let's just keep everything as is. We'll hit OK, let it do its thing. Okay, now time for the moment of truth. So I'm just going to hide my box layer, and I'll go into the paint room. And yeah, Okay. So we can work with that. It's not terrible. I was actually worried about this area up here, but it seems to have come in okay. It looks kind of like low res, which is crazy if you think this is like a 2K map, but I wouldn't worry about that. That's just the material that we used. So yeah, no, that's kind of fine. I'm not entirely sure why all of that didn't bake through. I mean, it is... yeah, it's weird. It's really weird, actually. But, oh well. So yeah, we can just do whatever we want for this area, and I think it should be fine. So yeah, this is what I was saying before about basically illusion, you know. Like, sure enough, kind of looks flat, but when you have sort of the emissive coming off of this and it's glowing, and from a distance, I don't know how far people will be able to kind of see it. It's definitely passable. You know, not the best. If you can model things in, like the teeth and the eyes, then I would say go for it. But, you know, obviously it depends on what you're doing. If it's just like a little prop for your game and they're going to be sort of everywhere, then yeah, you don't want that coming in at like 8,000 triangles for each one, because it's just no, thank you. So yeah, for us that'll kind of just do fine. We're not going to do the texturing in this video though. I think I've been taking a bit too long, so we'll basically redo this whole texture in the next video, because again, this is just like, this bake is from the material. It's pretty khaki. But what we will just do actually before we say goodbye is we will calculate our occlusion, and we'll also calculate our curvature. I mean, this would be calculated by default anyway when we start getting into smart materials, but might as well just do it now. Okay, so that's done. And if you're wondering why you can't see the curvature, it's because it is hidden by default. It's mostly the smart materials that use it, but it can create, like if you were to use it as like an overlay layer or something, it can come in quite handy for some pretty sort of nice effects. Looks like we've got some pretty strange stuff going on here, but I'll worry about that in the next video. I know what's going on here. So we didn't actually hide our root. Wow, that's embarrassing. So yeah, we were looking at two things here. So yeah, we'll just hide that. So this is that's the pumpkin done. And yeah, so I've completely messed up something. So yeah, no, it looks like we just need to do the rebake of both of these. So yeah, the reason that we got some weird stuff on the curvature, and the reason that I couldn't see it on the ambient occlusion, is by default, for some bizarre reason, your Vox layer stuff, like your sculpt, like this is the Vox tree panel, which is the exact same as if you were in the sculpt room. For some reason, it kind of just stays on, even though, I mean, I have video proof, I think, but I did disable this, and then I went over to the paint room, but it, as you can see, it just keeps enabling itself, which is a new thing. Like, it didn't always do this. So again, sort of the many annoying things about 3D Coat is some things they do work 1 month and then just completely changes the next. But you know, I'm not trying to hate too much. I do love 3D Coat. It is my primary. But anyway, now we need to rebake these. So let's just get them and delete. Yeah, okay, so that's much cleaner. In fact, we probably will make use of that, because that's it's pretty nice. So yeah, there's that. We'll do the texturing in the next video. If there's anything that I went sort of too fast on, I do recommend checking out my 3D Coat overview tutorials, but if you can't be bothered, then just throw me a message and say that, you know, you didn't understand this or that or whatever. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.